Returning to one of our top stories, and Joe Biden says we are closer than we have ever been to seeing a ceasefire in Gaza. The US president was speaking after negotiators wrapped up what they called constructive talks in Qatar. Those talks have been overshadowed after an attack on a Palestinian village in the occupied West Bank, which has been condemned by Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, joining me live is Dr. Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. So we're hearing the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken's heading to Israel. Those talks, how have they been and what more can we expect?
Look, I think the talks proceeded about as expected. You're never going to get a peaceful outcome or a solution to diplomacy on the first round. It always is a multi-round process that will go through several stages. So I think that probably what we've seen with these talks is agreement on broad aspects of a ceasefire agreement in terms of, will Israel keep its forces in the Gaza area? If they do pull out, how do Israel then ensure their own security and prevent Hamas from coming back into the region that could then threaten Israel? And obviously, the release of the hostages is central to this whole agreement. But we haven't got an agreement yet. So there'll be further talks going ahead, I believe, in Cairo in the coming days.
All right, in your experience and seeing what's been happening over the last months, almost getting to a year now since the October 7 attack, what is your thoughts here, Malcolm, on how potentially successful these talks will be?
It's really hard to know because, we've been here several times before where we've had discussions between the Israelis and Hamas, and they've broken down at the last minute because one side or the other or both just can't come to an agreement. I think for Israel, their critical concern, apart from the release of the hostages, is ensuring that Hamas do not come back and threaten Israel again and conduct further October 7th style attacks. So they can't afford to basically go through this entire war, all those 40,000 civilians dead, and then Israel is back where they started with a Hamas threat. From Hamas's perspective, they want power in Gaza. They don't want to see themselves displaced from influence and authority. So, this is a difficult diplomatic situation. There's no guarantee that it'll work. And then, of course, you've got the whole Iran and Hezbollah factor as well, which complicates things.
All right, and just some of the latest news here with the increased health concerns with a 10-month-old baby in the Gaza Strip has been confirmed with the first case of polio in Gaza in 25 years. So what are you hearing in regards to that?
Well, this is a war zone. The way the Israelis have carried out their operations has been, very destructive for Palestinian people. Now, part of the reason for that is because Hamas used the Palestinian people as human shields. But the Israelis have undertaken operations in a manner that is, in many respects, is not consistent with the laws of armed conflict. And so, part of that is allowing, humanitarian aid in and making sure that medical support gets in. So there's tragic news about that young child with the polio, but it's part of a broader situation that I think is a real concern. Both sides have to find an exit ramp. There's an old saying, jaw is better than war. I think both sides need to continue to talk and find an exit ramp, because otherwise, if they don't, then what will happen is Iran and Hezbollah will attack Israel, and this war will widen dramatically into a regional war that will have no stopping.
And finally, Malcolm, what do we know recently about the Hamas leader, the new leader, Yahya Sinwar, and his whereabouts, and what do we need to be looking out for here?
He's much more hardline than Haniyeh was. He's much more aggressive, much more militarist. So it's going to be more difficult to actually come to a negotiated ceasefire with Sinwar than Haniyeh would have been. But ultimately, Hamas also have to think about, can they win this war as well? There's no guarantee that they can. So I think that, Sinwar may actually find himself under pressure from Iran, who, after all, is Hamas's chief sponsor and supporter, to actually find a deal and a face-saving way to back out of this conflict. Because I think Iran understands that if they're drawn into this conflict directly, then there's quite the high possibility they will lose in the end. They'll lose certainly economically and politically, and they'll take massive damage in the process. So I think that there's now growing pressure from all sides on both Israel and Hamas to find a ceasefire solution.
Dr. Malcolm Davis, as always, thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you.